I wrote my first adventure on the Model 3, and I actually continued it when I had a real computer, the Model 4. So it was on the TRS-80 that I wrote them. The one that I wrote, I can't even remember what I named it, if I ever named it. The adventure game that I wrote was, maybe 200 lines of code or something at the time. But I mean, when you're that age, that's a big deal. I was maybe 14. To write a program of that length, I think it shows some stick-to-itiveness. And in my case, maybe it was an obsession that wasn't justified. There wasn't any great product coming out of it, but it was more about the process of doing it. It was the idea that you would create this situation and you would write a descriptive line of you, the character, have encountered this in a room. And it was the idea that you could basically give a reader or a player a specific experience. I think it was a control thing. I think ultimately, maybe not for everybody who creates these games, but I think there's a profound sense of power and control in being able to create this world that that at least one other person is going to have to buy into, and they're going to have to play in this world according to your rules. And it's a God thing. I think ultimately a lot of writing, particularly fiction, and by extension, I guess, interactive fiction and adventure games, is really it's the realization of being a god, a creator, creating a world that these lesser mortals, I don't think people consciously think of it that way, but the idea that these other people are going to have to buy into your world, that this world can be, it can be the vision that you have in mind. So that's, to the extent that I got into it, I started on a TRS-80. It was finished for my taste. I think the thing about being that age and being interested in this was that it really was about the process. There's a saying in writing, and I think in a lot of the creative arts, that it's about the process, not the product. And I think in all of our endeavors, we tend to lose sight of that. But when you're young, it's about, at least it was for me, just the doing of it. So it was big enough for me. I enjoyed it. I had some friends who played it. I don't know whatever happened to it, but it was done enough in that it was a finished product. Was it on the level of Adventure or Zork or Bedlam or one of the packaged adventure games? No, but I think it was just the idea of having this picture of wanting to create something and creating it. And I think that, to me, that was the revelation of computers at that time, was that you could envision these worlds, and within a fairly short amount of time, you could create a world and put it on screen, as it were, and put it in the hands of other people for them to experience. And when you're that age, I think that's really attractive. I think the thing that adventure games, the good ones anyway, and good fiction of mystery, adventure, thriller, problem-solving oriented fiction, the things that they have in common, I think the main thing that they have in common is that you come to care about the character because of the difficulty of the problems that character has to deal with. So I think there is very much a correlation between the type of stuff that I've come to write and enjoying these games. the adventure games as I remember them, the thing that I was so taken by was this idea you were literally stepping into a world. There was this sense of an activity going on, this sense of you're making a choice based on information that's presented to you on the screen. You can make a choice, and your choices have ramifications. And you think about that. If you're a 12, 13, 14-year-old kid, and up to then you've just read fiction, and you're reading a place in a story where the character does something, and you're like, dumbass, why are you doing it that way? Yeah, don't go into that room. You're going to get shot. Don't do it. Well, the beautiful thing about the adventure games is that you could avoid that choice. If you knew it was a bad idea to go into that room, or you didn't have a good feeling about it based on the description that you're given of the room that you're in, the objects that are there, the things you can manipulate, and the various commands you have at your disposal, if you decide not to go into that room because you think it's a bad idea, you had control. You didn't have to go into that room. So I think that was the thing that was so intoxicating about these things, and why I think some of that intoxication spilled over into writing, as it were, regular fiction or written fiction. I guess I never went into it, as it were, for a career, if you look at it that way, that is becoming an interactive fiction writer or creating text adventures. I think, one, because I didn't have the level of interest and commensurate with that, or really concomitant with that, I didn't have the skill set that it would take to become a truly good programmer, a truly good game designer, I think. I think ultimately you could design a good game, but I think there's a set of computer skills, programming skills that go along with that, that looking back at it now, I never had, and I don't know that I had the talent to develop. But I think more importantly, there's a permanence with books that I fell in love with at an early age. And I think I never got over that sense of permanence. My grandfather, who was very close to me, read all the time. And I had that modeled for me at an early age, and I learned to read at a very early age. And I developed this love of the smell of paper and glue and the feel of the bindings. And then as I got older and grew to appreciate words on the page, I guess some of those old-fashioned sensibilities stuck with me. And, for better or worse, I really like the traditional written word. I don't know that any technology is ever going to be able to truly replace the feeling, this tangible thing that is a book. And, I've become acquainted with and come to really enjoy technology. I have a nice Mac and I have other computers, but I write a lot of my drafts in pencil, and as well as a Royal Quiet Deluxe typewriter that I have on the other side of the room from 1940. The common bond that these two genres, if you will, an adventure game and in detective or adventure fiction, thriller fiction, I think the thing that they have in common is it's putting a character in, giving a character a problem or series of problems, and the character having to figure out how to get out of that problem. Kurt Vonnegut said that, you should make a character want something on the very first page, if only a glass of water. Okay, you were asking me why, why didn't I go down the road of interactive fiction, or, what is it that I know about adventure games and adventure fiction now, interactive fiction now, why is it that I haven't gone in that direction? And I think that one of the things is that, and maybe you've seen this borne out with the other writers that you've spoken to, the other people who design interactive fiction, but the nature of adventure games and interactive fiction, I'm not an expert on them, but as my experience has been, the way I understand it, is it's a way of designing a world so that you can account for just about every possible decision that the viewer or user, the game player, wants to make. Just about any decision that they want to make in this world. And as a writer, you want to create the world that you want the reader to experience. You want the reader to experience a specific world, the world that you create. And the thing I've likened it to, if you think of it in terms of point of view, in fiction, there are 3 points of view you can use. First, which is I did this, I did that. Well, we'll get to second. Third person point of view is he, she, or it did this, it did that. Well, the other point of view is second person, and that's you do this, you do that. And that's what I liken interactive fiction and adventure games to. It's really second person point of view. It's the creator basically telling the game player, here's what's based on what you just said here, based on what you just chose to do, here is what is happening to you. But in traditional fiction, I don't know why, but it's been always considered kind of a no-no to write things in second person. Probably the most famous recent example of a second person piece of fiction that was profoundly successful against everybody's opinion was Bright Light's Big City by Jay McInerney. And in fact, it's really considered his most successful and his best book. So I think that's the other reason why, myself and probably a lot of other writers don't go down that road, is because some of the taboos that are put against second person, but also this idea of creating a specific world and giving the reader or the experiencer, if you will, a specific experience. Okay, so there we go.